So, hello everyone. We're gonna start the second day of Balcon with Nati, who will talk about network access uncontrolled.
Hi guys, I am Tanoy, no TTY. Let me just put the slides on. All right. Yeah, today I'm going to be talking about network access control and how do we bypass this. The topic is network access uncontrolled, insecurities in both security. Something about myself, I am a security researcher in a office called Dark Matter, Zenith Labs. I am also a travel enthusiast. I used to be a CTF player, security consultant, and right now I spend most of my time doing zero-day research and bug hunting. My primary experience is with respect to infrastructure penetration testing, infrastructure research, and I've presented in Balcon for the last 2 years on various parts of my infrastructure research. This is also one of them, and this is network access control research. This talk, again, will be talking about access control, port security, various types of access control like 802.1x, AE, AR, and the basic network security. We'll also be going through a tool that I made for doing any kind of network access control bypass. So just to get a feel of the audience, how many of you guys are aware of network access controls? Oh yeah. So you guys have network engineers around, I guess. So network access control, as the name states, is control at the access level. Essentially, it was earlier ideally built for having control by the IT administrators, infrastructure administrators, to know when an element is being inserted into the network, to know when a computer is being inserted into the network. This again got process governance guys, risk guys involved, and had a huge process beyond it, resulting in multiple solutions and vendors coming up with different kinds of solutions for it. One of the most utilized and prominent recommendation given nowadays for network access control is the 802.1x network access control. So why it was needed is primarily because of lack of knowledge on network, lack of control on elements connecting to the network. Why was it done? It was done because it was a security. It was required as a security solution, but utilized as a compliance solution, and it had a varied type of implementations that we will talk about in now. So how port security evolved back in 2000s? There was not really much port security. So administrators primarily implemented MAC-based filtering port security as to only authorized MAC addresses could connect to the network. In 2001, 802.1 groups came ahead and they mentioned that we need to have some kind of standard authentication mechanism, and hence started 802.1x on LAN. That is post that, on 2004, there was a newer version of 802.1 authentication released, which is primarily used in the industry today. In 2005, a person named Steve Riley released the switch and hub attack, which is primarily today used for bypassing any kind of network access control. It was instrumental in showing the weakness in 802.1 port security. In 2010, there's a new version of 802.1 that had come up called MACsec. It was slightly more powerful, and post that we saw the switch and hub attack got converted into an excellent script written by Duckwall, and he released this shell script, which is very easy to utilize in a normal environment to demonstrate that 802.1 is not the best optimized security solution. Now later days, in the recent days, there are two tools which is actually used for penetration testing. One is Fenrir, which is a Python-based 802.1x bypass tool, and Silent Bridge, which also demonstrates capabilities of 802.1 AE bypasses by doing capture hashes, capture of hashes. The latest version had come out last year called 802.1 AR, that utilizes secure device ID or the dev ID in the protocols. So when we're talking about NAC, network access control, there are primarily two phases of it. One is pre-admission and another one is post-admission. The pre-admission ones are element detection, risk profile, quarantine zone. So obviously if any element is being introduced into your network, you need to be able to detect that, okay, there's an intruder who's come into the network. You should be able to profile it, whether if this intruder comes with a MAC address of Cisco VoIP phone, so you would profile it as, okay, this VoIP behavior, probably this is a VoIP phone that is connected to the network. Or a random, via the MAC address, you can actually detect which kind of vendor is connected to the network. This is, however, not always a best solution, but this is utilized by the industry a lot. Then, based on the risk profile, you're put into a quarantine zone. So you should ideally have quarantine zone pre-admission because your system needs to communicate with certain guest network. So quarantine zone is going to be primarily guest network. And if your network is well segmented, you'll have segmentations over the VLAN, over the user VLANs as well. Then you have identification of both managed and unmanaged elements, and L2 and L3 enforcements that we'll be looking. Post-admission, the solution post-admission was behavior-based, more like an IPS solution. So like we just discussed, element detection was about detecting new elements into the network. Authentication would allow users to automatically get authenticated into the network. Endpoint security assessments is basically your host-based solutions. Like it will check your antivirus updates, whether or not you're valid, up-to-date antivirus, or it's going to knock you off into a quarantine zone. So this is more common where you see consulting firms where your employees will most probably be traveling most of the time. So in those kind of scenarios, probably an employee had not come to your office for about a month or so. So he would be lacking in patches for more than a month sometimes. And in that case, you don't directly allow him to attach to your network. You have to do this kind of assessments. The remediation for any kind of detection is to put you into quarantine zone. And enforcement of these policies are, of course, very much necessary. Authorization can be done with respect to Active Directory or Radius servers. And post-admission, it's going to be continuous checking of behavior from network traffic behavior from your system. For example, if you have Symantec NAC, so you have Symantec host intrusion prevention systems or Symantec NIPS, where you're going to monitor if your traffic being generated from your computer is malicious, you're going to flag it off on your board. With this, I come on to a theorem called the only way of port security is when you have a cat and the size of the cat, and it's directly proportional to the size of the cat and the mood of the cat. Because while we worry all about port security and try to implement various methods, it's not actually very easy or feasible to actually say that if I control my ports, I'll not have any network intrusions. Okay. So implementing port security, right? So when administrators started implementing port security, they started moving on to solutions like static IP-based port security. So I don't give you IP addresses, which is probably the most inconvenient way, but still followed in extremely small startups. Then the second one is MAC-based port security, which is not very commonly followed nowadays. However, there is a Cisco solution called IP Stickies, and that does authorize the first one or two, whatever your threshold is, ports getting connected to a computer, and only those MACs will be permanently allowed on those specific ports. The third one is software-based Network access control, basically giving NAC solutions, DHCP NAC solutions, DHCP plugins, host integrity checks, and broadcast listeners. And the final one, or the latest day recommended solutions, are 802.1x, 802.1AE, AR. AR does not really have a industry practice, does not have any solution in place. It's just 2018 when the solution came out in IEEE. So we will. Okay, so DHCP proxy. What happens is basically a client connects to the network, the policy validates it, and this is an example of semantic endpoint protection. It does compliance checks with the policy manager, and if it allows, it gives you access into the network, otherwise it will put you onto a quarantine zone. And generally, host integrity is checked in semantic using the antivirus status, antivirus patch status, firewall status, server stack status, and patch updates. Then moving on to LAN enforcement with DHCP plugin, it again looks for host integrity checks, and it permits you, when you're complied to these integrity checks, and does not really look for authentication, authorization of any sort. It gives you a DHCP IP addresses. So client sends a DHCP request, enforcer assigns a quarantined IP address and puts you directly on the quarantine zone. Enforcer validates and checks the policies on the host integrity rules. Enforcer initiates DHCP release and renews your new DHCP IP address, which will allow you access into the network. All right. The next one is just performing host integrity checks, where as soon as you connect on the network, or whenever you, it's kind of similar to DHCP based IP address assignment. It's just going to check your host integrity rules and give you access. Symantec's going to give you access into the network. Okay. All right. Next, moving on to 802.1x standards. So 802.1x standards, 802.1 standards was ideally started in 2001. Then they over time released multiple standards like 802.1, 802.1 2001, 2004, 2010, which was basically including it in 802.1 AE, and or also called as MACsec, and 2001 AR, which is called DevID, and it has no public implementation yet. AE, however, is very less utilized in the industry, probably in a very few organizations in the world, because each one of their routers are probably $1,000 to $1,000, and switches are like pretty costly. Okay. Now, what are the components that go in 802.1x? You have one, the supplicant, second, the authenticator, and third, the authentication server. This is a simple diagram. The explanation, the flow graph is here. When a supplicant or your user device gets connected to the switch port, you send a new connection request. Authenticator responds back with a EAP request identity. EAP is Extensible Authentication Protocol. Then your supplicant automatically sends the response identity to the authenticator, which the authenticator uses to get your validation from the radius access request, and it gets the radius access challenge, gives it back to you, and then you solve this challenge again over EAP, gives it back to the authenticator, and it's facilitating you to get access into the network with your credentials this time. Which basically means when you connect to the switch port, none of your traffic is allowed other than EA pole, and once you're authenticated into the network, everything is allowed and everything goes fluently. Then on 802.1x 2010 or MACsec or 802.1 AE, we see something more that has been implemented, that is post 802.1x, there is a session key agreement that happens, and then the entire communication becomes encrypted in nature, and you can have encrypted communication. In this is obviously slightly more secure than 802.1x, and it's, however, back in 2010, right? So when we look at this and we look at something else, we find it is quite similar when a client tries to access. This is another protocol that uses accessing the client access point, which authenticates you onto the authenticating server. The handshakes done are very similar in this, and this is nothing but your WPA Wi-Fi protocol. Not even WPA2, this WPA, and it's quite interesting because this, as we all know, that WPA is a vulnerable protocol. It is not a good practice to have it. Okay, and one interesting feature about 802.1x given as a feature is MAC bypass. So when you go onto the console, they give you this feature that you can bypass specific ports by MAC bypass, and when you're talking about security, bypass is never a good practice. Now, a golden rule of security is when you're trying to bypass anything, or golden rule of bypass is don't try to jump the gate before trying to open it. You will, at every one of your organizations that you're going to do NAC testing, if you ever do on port, you will find a way to bypass it, mostly, unless it's a real strict organization where nothing is available and everything is being built with the latest standards. You're probably going to get a printer that is having a MAC bypass in place, and you can connect onto that network pretty easily by spoofing the MAC address, and yeah, you're through. So a few of these access control methods and how you can bypass it. MAC-based access control method can be bypassed using MAC-based IP sticky that is used, can be bypassed, of course, using MAC spoofing of printers. This is primarily in printer area, local area networks that you can get access to. If it is DHCP proxy-based, the best way to get access to this is assigning yourself static IP addresses. And if there is DHCP proxy enforcement, here you might not be able to get static IP addresses giving you access into the network, but then these require you to have solutions installed on your device. So if you have something like Symantec and it works only for Windows, you will probably be able to find a rule exception telling that, okay, Linux computers allow without any checks. So you can enumerate for these kind of bypasses, and you can get access without any compatible device, with the non-compatible device rules. Broadcast listeners basically need to be present on every network and listening to every network. I have not really seen any implementation of this anywhere in any organization because of the sheer amount of effort. But if you have to escape this as well, you generally set static ARP entries and you NAT over the network, and you will be able to bypass this as well. Host integrity checks is again like DHCP. It is, I'm sorry, this is a mistake, but you can bypass this again by assigning static IP address. 802.1x, it has the feature called MAC bypass. It has this channel not encrypted. It requires additional IPsec to allow secure channel communication. So what we need to do is we have to identify bypassed MAC addresses if we want to actually get access into the network, for example, printers, or we can apply something like the switch and hub attack, which is not really convenient, or we can do, and which is more convenient to do is the inline tapping and authentication relaying and then getting access into the network. 802.1 AE MACsec uses weak authentication mechanisms in certain implementation like TEAP and MSCHAP, and sometimes you can actually downgrade it. So you can actually utilize a side channel to authenticate yourself on your radius, or authenticate the device on your radius server and capture their hashes, and use this for getting access onto the network. 802.1 AR has not really been implemented in the network, so I'm not really sure like what you can do with this yet. Something about MACsec that we had already discussed, that it is a protocol which is very similar to WPA. It's implemented only in a few high-cost switches, and its passwords can actually be captured, and hashes can actually, its weak implementation hashes can actually be captured. And so asking an organization or giving recommendation to an organization that you need to put 802.1 AE, which is the latest standard, is pretty much no use. Moving on to the tools that help you in bypassing 802.1x, they're like, first one is Marvin tool that was built, where you basically put static IP addresses and you set everything up to do interception in between the supplicant and the authenticator, which was primarily more like a manual practice. So you would not want to have this in a pen test environment. Duckwall scripts were actually one of the best builds till today and still utilized, and even I prefer to utilize these for my red teaming and pen test activities. Fenrir is again an amazing tool, and it has a complete easy to utilize interface. However, since it's doing everything over Python, it slows down your processing and it slows down your access into the network. If you're doing vulnerability assessments with this, it makes sense to do it, but if you're doing red teaming, I wouldn't really recommend you to use this. Then the Silent Bridge solution. This is a pretty awesome solution, and this tool helps you bypass almost like 802.1x and 802.1 AE. It allows you to capture your password hashes directly off any machine that you want to go and connect it on the network to, if the protocol implementation is not super secure. But however, Silent Bridge is not a practically built solution. It's a huge implementation, as can be seen over here. It probably would take the entire desk, and I'm pretty sure if you're going for doing red teaming activities with this, it's going to be very visible, and you'll have to have a very good explanation to put this in place. Then Silent Bridge also taps on the network, but you require to set the settings manually by analyzing the data and the protocols that are being passed in the network. Because of this, I thought, like, when I was actually building this, so I primarily used to use Duckwall scripts because they were the best in the industry and probably the easiest to bypass most of it. However, for doing red teaming, there was always difficulties with Duckwall script, because Duckwall script is only meant for a POC scenario. So because of this, I sat and I was like, okay, we require a tool that will help you to do end-to-end red teaming perspective, where I, as a remote attacker, just need to go and plug this in like Pony Express and be able to bypass any kind of security, whether it's MAC-based, NAC-based, IP-based, and 802.1x based, and inject data onto the network whenever I want. And of course, it needed to be low cost, easy to implement, device in the middle tool, basically. So, and there are a few additional features that I built on this, and let's look at how it looks. So, Ghostberry is what I call it, is my Raspberry with network access unlocking tools on it. So it is built primarily over Raspberry 3B Plus and ARM Kali Linux. It requires one additional adapter, and this is pretty much used to bypass any kind of network access control on any network. And you don't really need Kali or Arch. You can have a plain vanilla OS, because you're primarily you would primarily, in a red teaming scenario, pivot over SSH tunnel via this utility. So interesting fact is that I burnt out my Raspberry while trying to implement this in a PoE scenario, and anyone who wants to play around with it, that's definitely a good solution to have, something over PoE. Then you would not really require the power socket. Okay, so of course, this is primarily built to utilize in red teaming scenarios, but since I'm now into security research and I don't do as much red teaming, I utilize it as an injector between two devices which are not really having an interface where I can put in Python and run stuff in. This can be placed between HMIs and PLCs, or VoIP phone and your VoIP server, or between IP camera switch and IP camera itself. You can inject and you can exfiltrate data with this, the RTSP data with this, and it's pretty interesting. In some of my pen tests, I utilized this one. Actually, in the first pen test when I built this, I utilized this one, and I was able to get access to the camera feeds of all the ATM cameras. So it was pretty awesome. Okay, now talking about the architecture, what would actually be required. So a victim computer would ideally be connected to an authenticator or a switch. Here we enter our Ghostberry, which is connected over WLAN to our attacker computer, and it has two networks ports, that is H0 and H1, two network interfaces, and which is bridged. This is connected into the network, and authenticator authenticates on the authentication server, and other user computers are also connected to the authenticator. The tool modules or the components are basically configuration component. When you run it, you will have to configure it at the very basic. For example, you would want to put a host name that does not get flagged off when you're in the network, and then you have a tapping module which initially allows your device to go into passive sniffing mode, and it will be able to get any traffic that is passing between the user and the authenticator and the system. Then you have the rules module. Rules module is primarily implemented to allow any system in the network to connect back onto your machine. It allows you to take reverse TCP and other such connections back onto your victim, your Ghostberry, using your victim IP address. The inject module is automation of certain scripts which red teamers generally would utilize a lot, like Metasploit, RDPs, crackmap exec, and whatever custom module that you will want to build. Side channel injection is for a scenario where you do not have tools and utilities present on your small ARM device, like Metasploit or Nmap. You don't want to put it on your ARM device. Rather, you have it on your attacker machine, and you're just utilizing this bridge as to get access to the network and exfiltrating data. As mentioned, the setup is quite simple. The setup, it's easy setup. Everything is taken care for you. Of course, this is if you have put this on Kali or Arch. The only difficulty with Kali is that for some reason its IP tables have some weird configurations, so you will have to run these command update alternatives config for IP tables, ARP tables, and EB tables, and use the legacy one. You will have to preset the legacy one because the entire utility uses the legacy commands. Okay, now the setup demo is not sure this is available. These are ASCII NEMA recordings that I have. The setup is just that simple, followed by you to run the configuration interface. It gives you a nice interface where you can just set up all the required components. Of course, when you don't put in any information, these are the minimum information that is required for you to do access into the network. So you set up all the interface information. In this case, you can set up whatever IP address you want for the bridge gateway, and you set up two informations called as the SSH callback port and TTYD callback port. These are your management interfaces. Set the host name, set the switch interface, and it should be done. Yeah, in ideal scenario, if you have your Ethernet connected, if you have your Ethernet ports all connected and working, it should get the MAC addresses directly from your Ethernet, and this is the local system Ethernet port that you have. So this is that. Just go over the configurations. So how it looks is basically you will have your configuration module. It has your Ghostberry basically has a computer interface and a switch interface. So your computer interface will be at 0, your switch interface will be at 1, and you initiate all of the you initialize all of these informations with it, where this can be whatever you want as to not have a IP conflict. So, we utilize this one. SSH callback port and TTYD callback ports. Primarily SSH, I utilize it only for doing SSH pivoting in this case. Whereas if you want to pivot between multiple Ghostberries in the network, like if you have put it, so if you have a red team scenario where two levels are of different access rights and you want this device sitting on both the levels and interacting with each other, the only possible way of communication might be either on 445 or on port 80, right? And having SSH on 445 and port 80 is not something that I prefer. Rather, I prefer it over a web console of SSH. So TTYD allows you to have a web interface of your bash prompt, and it's a very interactive prompt. And if you have it over whatever 445 port, you'll be able to access this device from anywhere in the network while you're connected in the network. In this case, I've used 4 threes and 4 twos, and yeah. Host name you set onto your either your victim machine, whatever you utilize, or something similar to what naming convention the organization would possibly utilize. Max NAT range and min NAT range is primarily to obfuscate from the detection methods, because this is primarily, these ranges are used by Windows systems, the higher ports that are used on the Windows system for RPC communication. And yeah, switch MAC address does not really matter. You can set it whatever you want. Ideally, you want to set it as per whatever device is being utilized by that organization as much, or you can just leave it, it'll take your own MAC. All right, the configuration video is done. Now, how the tap works is primarily, it is a wrapper around DuckWalls 802.1x. It extracts information like the computer MAC address, computer IP address, gateway MAC address, and helps you bridge and allows you to get authenticated on the network. So okay, so yeah. So tapping, you pretty much only launch whatever protocol you want to tap. For example, in an environment which is predominantly DHCP and Windows driven, the best way to actually tap would be to have the UDP port 53, that is DNS service that is taken. Okay, yeah, it works. All right. So here I go into the tap interface and I start tapping the UDP port 53 DNS service. So what it's going to do is it's going to bridge an interface. It's going to bridge a transparent interface and allow all traffic to pass through till the time it doesn't encounter a DNS packet that is going. The second it notices a DNS packet, it starts extracting all the required information like the computer IP address, computer MAC, switch, gateway MAC address, and the DNS server, and it saves on its own self. Once it's done, it's going to allow you to, it's going to recreate all of the I'm going to set the basic rules and it's supposed to be stopping. Okay. Yeah, there's some problem with the video. And it allows you to get access into the network, and post this you pretty much have to do your own red teaming operations with the rest of the modules that is in place. So the next module in place is the rules module, where you define rules for your reverse TCP connection or your systems connecting back to you. Few of the use cases, prominent use cases of this is when you host something like Responder in your network, you have various servers in Responder which is getting traffic from the local area network onto your machine. So like HTTP service and SMB service and DNS service. So by setting up these rules for your setting up these ports and for the rules, you can actually set up this interface and you can capture traffics and connect back to your system. I'll just cover the three of the modules together. Then I'll show the demo of all the three. Right. So inject module is automation of the prominent ports that you want access to, like Responder, RDP, MSF, as well as SMB. These modules are still being built by me more, and however these are of course not very OPSEC safe, because once you enable a rule on the machine, you will not be able to, the victim will never be able to access those IP addresses or those ports of those systems. Okay. So the network rules are also similar to configure. Where you can create rules, delete rules. These are already the preset rules given in the network to get your access back into the system. And it's pretty easy to set up a rule and capture various type of traffic that you want to capture from the network. Yeah. The injection module is also pretty easy to use because it's all preset modules. So all the rules that you have to build on it is pre-built, and you can actually just define the specific modules and you will be able to get the access to those modules and set up those servers locally as well. The final module is the SSH pivoting and the side channeling module, and it utilizes basically the Wi-Fi interface for you to inject traffic. So what happens here is once your victim is connected, it's just going to allow you to build an SSH tunnel from the bridged port and the WLAN port, and you will be able to access into the network, sending traffic from your mobile to the network. And setting that up is also as simple. And yeah, you need to give the L host, that's local port, local remote host, remote port, and your username and password. Right now, the modules don't have SSH key integrations, but yeah, we know most of your Kali systems run with the credentials root and tour, so it's okay. Right. Work in progress right now with the tools is that I'm still building a poisoner utility, so it will be able to poison, and it's still not built yet. You would be able to inject traffic onto the local victim machine directly. One interesting concept that Duckwall had thought and this said was basically you can probably send SMTP emails without it originating from the SMTP server. So you can actually send phishing mails to the victim. He would not know, and no one in the network would know because it's not coming from the valid server, but rather from the endpoint. And it is, of course, not very not very easy to implement Raspberry with power over Ethernet. Nowadays, most of your offices are using power over Ethernet, and it would, of course, help you to power on the Raspberry Pi with power over Ethernet and perform this. In my case, I fried my Raspberry while performing this, and yeah. And there is still some research that is required to do 802.1 AE relay. I am actually trying to utilize some concepts by SensePost on WPA sync path, and probably be able to create this. Final thoughts on this is basically network access control. You always utilize encrypted channels like IPsec. NAC is, of course, never the ultimate solution. You should always prefer defense in depth. When we go to any organization that has implemented NAC, their first statement is, we already have given you access into the network by bypassing the NAC rules. With this tool, you can actually not require to bypass NAC rules. You can utilize this tool itself to perform interception and injection attacks. Then the most important aspect of these tools coming up in the market today, the control for this is to spread user awareness. If you have a small device in place like the Pony Express or PON plug, the users must be aware and asking questions as to who's plugged it, and not any, at least in any of my red teaming that I've done till today, not a single user actually asked as to why is this device suddenly in the middle of my network. Then NAC solution implemented in 2004 is being implemented in industry today. You do have to make sure that you are aware that this is not the ultimate solution. 2018 has not yet been manufactured. For you to upgrade your entire infrastructure, if you rely on 2004 Mac implementation, is going to cost you a lot. Then, if an hardware has been implanted in your environment, if you find such a device on your environment, there is something way more critical than just a NAC bypass. Then, what makes the attack harder is NAC, but it does not make it go away. So don't ignore it, but that's not the only thing that you should be implemented. This is my let's see. Any questions? Yeah.
Hello, thanks for a nice talk. I have a question. Do you have any experience with the TrustSec implementation?
Sorry?
Do you have any experience with TrustSec implementation?
Okay, the Cisco ISC solutions.
Yes?
Cisco ISC solutions are cross-forest authentication on a network that does not really have like I'm not sure like what they use for authentication protocol per se, but for authentication they use the Active Directory and Radius servers for authentication. Like, are you comparing that with port security? So the TrustSec, what I understand, what I am aware of, is basically used for identifying users if there's a moving user from one area and getting its user profile, for building user profiles to give access to the network, right? But it has nothing to do with blocking ports or, yeah, authentication is almost similar to 802.1x. Again, bypassing it in this NATed fashion or this transparent bridge fashion, even that can be done via transparent bridge and injections.
Hi. As I understand, the main access to this system is through the Wi-Fi module to the Raspberry Pi. When the signal is weak, when there's no physical connectivity, it's far away, and you're using bridged ports on Ethernet, can you use some auto SSH or some reverse tunnel to connect?
Yeah.
How do you connect to the bridge then?
Yeah, so
Does it have to get internal address?
so from the Wi-Fi itself to the bridged port, it's using SSH pass and SSH tunnel, right? And that gives you access into the network just by building SSH tunnels. If there is a weak signal for the Wi-Fi, there is a lot of delay on your Wi-Fi. So you can also implement the same using a USB dongle, right? And you can get access, you can open your access to the device with a USB dongle on the internet. Yeah. But internet is primarily not preferred much because no red team engagement would actually want you to broadcast. At least I have not got much red team engagements which are okay with hosting a CNC on the internet.
Yeah, but you couldn't use internal Ethernet ports to communicate over the client's network.
You can use the
How do you
Ethernet-
connect bridge then?
sorry?
How do you then connect the bridge? There's bridging two ports. Does it have to have internal address in the network?
So this is basically what is happening in this rules part. I'll just show you. So what you do is, when you set a rule or in your Raspberry, what happens is you have this bridge port where the communication to the specific port that you have mentioned in your rules will be blocked from going to the final endpoint device, rather forwarded to your bridged interface where your entire communication would happen and interaction would happen. So if you want to actually, so for example, when we configure this management interfaces, that is SSH callback port or the TTYD port, it's basically to allow you to communicate with all your devices in the network. So you might be having access to one laptop and sitting right next to one laptop, or sitting in the conference room plugged into the network, right? And you can basically, in this case, from SSH on port 2222 of the computer IP address, that is the victim computer IP address, you actually get the service of Ghostberry or of the Raspberry.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions?
Well, I don't have a question, but I would like to thank you for excellent presentation and lots of cats. Good job.
Well, everyone on the internet loves cats.
True. Anyone else? Okay.
Right. All right, thank you.